Bo Pelini's off to Youngstown, Ohio, and Nebraska stays back and heads out the other way to the West Coast to take on USC in very much a glamour matchup back in the old days. But this year it's the Holiday Bowl with a couple of 3 and 4 loss teams matching up. We got Brian Towle of SB Nation here to join us and help us break down the Nebraska personnel as they head to a bowl game that they would rather have not slipped to at this point. Brian, is this team going to be motivated? We'll start it off with the old motivated question.
If motivation you mean go out and win one last time for old man Bo and the guy that recruited you, they'll have motivation. They're really not healthy at a big spot at the offensive line. The one thing I remember about USC is that their defensive tackles do kind of get after it, even though they lost one guy. They're going to be on their third-string center, probably second or third-string right guard. It's going to be a little bit of patchwork. The playmakers are healthy. Ameer Abdullah is finally 100% back again after that injury he suffered against Purdue. Defensively, Gregory sounds like he's not going to go. He has not practiced too much. We've seen him more than likely the last time we've seen him in a Nebraska jersey. Outside of that, the defense is pretty healthy. But losing Gregory and losing your best defensive lineman really kind of hurts. Savior then, Malik Collins is going to be healthy on the D line, and that'll help. And everybody to the back seven is healthy, but line-wise, Nebraska's probably not in great shape. Everywhere else, Nebraska's probably going to be healthy and ready to go. And it's an interesting time where not a lot of Nebraskans are really right now. The bowl game's third, and we're literally almost a week away, and there's no real hype for it. I think it's more of a closure thing right now than anything, and a lot of people are looking forward to get the start of Mike Riley's era at Nebraska. He started off pretty well the last couple weeks, but they're definitely looking at getting everything kind of done and out, and a new era starting in Lincoln.
Is Mike Riley staying away from the football team? Is he kind of backing off and letting this practice series of sessions kind of play themselves out and staying away from the football team and letting the coaches coach?
Great question, actually. He was off last week. He got a full week of recruiting in. His major targets were the big guys that Nebraska has verbal. Went to Denver to get 2 guys, Avery Anderson and Everett Lee. Went to Kansas City to get the Davis twins, who are big recruits that he needed to definitely show up. Went all the way down to Atlanta to get Aaron Williams. And then he also went to New Orleans and got the receiver, Stealing Morgan, and visited with Kendall Bussey, who will make a decision tomorrow between Nebraska, A&M, and Tennessee. Then he came back. He's come back this week, and they've actually shown pictures of him and the staff that they have there now watching practice and such. And it's kind of interesting. It's awkward to the point that, and he had an interview with today on the Husker Sport Network with Greg Sharp, the play-by-play guy of Nebraska. He said, it's kind of awkward to watch a team you're going to be coaching, but I think he's getting a really good feel of what this team can do and can't do. Plus, technically he's the head coach and he's the 10th coach on the staff. So I would think that, if anything, he's got eyes and ears that can give a lending hand to Barney Cotton's staff as to what's going to go happen with USC as soon as we played them this year. So maybe kind of a little bonus if you think about it that way, legally by the NCAA standards. But he has seen practice a couple times. He hasn't really ever given a gist of what he's thought about it, which is probably a good idea right now. Let the staff, the staff do their final game, and only one gentleman of Bo Pelini's staff on Nebraska is being retained. That's defensive back safety coach Charlton Warren. So he's kind of stepped back, but he's also paid attention to what's going on, and it's probably one of the most interesting things to see. Somebody like that, get a head start and help out, the staff that was there. You don't ever see, there's a little coach, kind of I wouldn't say a cutthroat thing, but it seems like I would say a little animosity, and it's good that they can be working together for one final time to send the kids out a winner.
Yeah, we get caught up in evaluating coaches based on their win-loss records and based on championships, but here's a guy that has proven with less talent that he can flat-out coach. He's taken less talent in in the Pac-12 and usually gets his team to postseason play. The guy can flat out coach, so he brings a different perspective. He can stand back with no attachment to this team, no history with these players, and be able to stand back and lend a different perspective. I was going to ask you about Gregory, because it just seems kind of like a waste where a guy comes into a football program like a Nebraska with that type of talent, sheer talent, speed, athleticism, ability to disrupt an offense. And, yeah, he had his moments and he played really well. It wasn't his fault, but in terms of contributing to something special is basically his career passed by at Nebraska, and he never really got that chance.
Yeah, last year kind of came out of nowhere last year. We knew we had something decent coming. He happened to be a guy that Nebraska got last minute from Purdue. Probably would have helped out Darrell Hazel at Purdue tremendously, but that didn't happen for them. This season, I remember his first game, literally played one set against Florida Atlantic, and never saw him the rest of the game. There was that against McNeese, and there are bits and pieces that we saw of Randy Gregory, but in the end, he just had a lackluster year, which is kind of amazing that through the whole season he stayed a top 5 NFL draft prospect. He'll probably go a top 5, top 10 pick, depending on team, obviously. The one thing that I know that NFL scouts have wondered about him is a weight issue. I mean, he's a tall guy. He's not a very heavy guy, which is easy if you're playing lower-level Big Ten teams and such. But against big left tackles in the NFL like Michael Oher and Tyron Smith, you're going to need to, hit the buffet line a little bit, not even so much the weight room. So that's something that probably will hurt Gregory. One other thing that could hurt him, and I don't know how big of a deal it's going to be until you get the anonymous sources stuff that everybody seems to have to deal with when it comes to quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater, Marcus Mariota, Wave High, is, it's going to be a motor thing with Randy. His first year at Nebraska, he got put down on the right side a lot, really kind of allowed just what he wanted. And pass rushing, there's probably nobody better in the conference, I would say, at least the Big Ten, maybe top 3 or 4 guys in the nation than Randy Gregory. His biggest weakness is run defense. If he's, he gets, his weight doesn't help him, and sometimes his technique really kind of gets away from him. This year, you can also say stamina has hurt him, because let's face it, he hasn't played that much. He only played, week 3 was his really first true test in pads, and even in the fall camp, we were told he was hurt a little bit, but never really got too good of conditioning in. And the way Nebraska did conditioning this year, their longest practice in fall camp was 1 hour and 40 minutes. So that's going to be a big thing with him. Again, top 5 guy, you can develop him. You're hopeful that he's not a bust. Unfortunately, sometimes when you get drafted that high, it's either you're an All-Pro or you're not worth you're worth a whole heck of a lot, which is kind of unfair to a lot of people. But that high of a draft pick, that tends to what happens. So Randy's going to do pretty well in this next level. It kind of depends on what team. I've heard of more of a dark Marcus Ware type, a 3-4 outside linebacker, which would probably help him a lot, considering then he could just worry about doing things, stand up and pass rush and coverage. He could probably do pretty well in coverage with running backs and such. Run game is going to be a big issue with him. He's going to have to hit the Golden Corral. And there's a funny story. There's a funny story in Lincoln. There's a Chipotle right about 2.5 blocks from Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. And one of the famous things you can get at that Chipotle is called the Slauson. This is named after Matt Slauson, who was an offensive guard at Nebraska and went on with the New York Jets, and he still plays, and I can't remember who he plays with now. The Slauson is, you get the big burrito, shell, rice, beans, meat, whole 9 yards. The Slauson is 2 burritos.
Okay.
Third it on each other. Okay. All the rice, all the beans, all the meat, and then sour cream, cheese, whatever you want. And you only pay for the double meat. And sausages, kill those one of those a day. And I've always said, why don't we just put them on the Slauson diet, and everything will work out well. So trust me, a couple guys in Nebraska did that, and they're not on the team anymore. But Randy could probably do it.
They need to add you to the staff because those are some of the nuances that you could bring to the table that they miss. Just studying those X's and O's, and they miss some subtleties like that.
Yeah, that's probably it.
I missed the Golden Corral. That used to be my Sunday spot, and now I don't think there's one in the entire state.
I know. Sizzler. Where's Sizzler gone?
Where did those go?
Steak and all-you-can-eat shrimp. I don't know, man. I think it's more of a Western thing. It's crazy.
Most people were either Sizzler people or Ponderosa people.
More of a Ponderosa, yes. There used to be a bunch of Ponderosas up to like lately in Lincoln, so it is what it is. There's a Brazilian steakhouse now just as far away from Memorial Stadium, so works out well, just a little more expensive. So,
you know, Brian, these confidence pools are huge, and I'm not just seeing USC as not just the popular pick, a unanimous pick. I also see the 35s, the 33s, the 38s placed next to USC. I don't see anybody giving Nebraska a chance in this game. Does that seem fair?
Kind of, in that, let's face it, Nebraska's gone through a whole heck of a lot in the last 3 weeks. You know, as on Coronation, we've kind of just like, you know, wow, please, Sunday come, it's game week then. You know, then we can just think about something else besides Mike Riley, about Pope Pelini, about anything like that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Cody Kessler against this defense. Pope Pelini's not there to call the defense anymore. Defensive coordinator John Papachis is actually going to have to call a game. You know, those of you that don't know, Bo Pelini called defenses. John signaled them in. John organized everything. John got the personnel all right. But in the end of the day, whatever was ran on the field, Bo Pelini ran. That was his. Now it's John Papachis and Ross Sells. Charles Warren will be in that brain trust. This happened once before against Arkansas State when Bo Pelini went down to the hospital at halftime with cold issues or heart issues or such. It wasn't bad because that was against Gus Malzahn, and they did okay against that. It worries me, though, because that was Arkansas State. That was a Sun Belt team. This is Steve Sarkisian, who has not really ever done well against this offense. The 3 games they faced against it while he was at Washington, even in the loss in the Holiday Bowl a few years back, Nebraska didn't. You know, Jake Locker didn't do much against it. You can the argument was more made about the Nebraska offense more than anything. But defensively, it does worry that Cody can just nail these guys, and you know they got a couple pretty good receivers at USC. I haven't really dug into it wholeheartedly, but I know Kessler's there, and Kessler's the one that makes me worry because no Gregory means you're depending on Malik Collins for a pass rush. You're going to depend on Jack Gingrich for a pass rush. I don't know. I guess just told Gingrich there's a raccoon back there and hit it. You know, whatever. That's probably bad for PETA. But you know, I expect to actually see Nebraska do a lot of stuff they didn't do under Pelini. I expect to see things like cover 3. I expect to see one gap stuff. Bo Pelini was very adamant about a one high shell running the safety down to help in rush coverage. That helps until you get a decent play action game against Nebraska, and then it kills them. Nebraska's pretty good against the pass. It's that run defense that Melvin Gordon bought a ticket and went to New York on. So if you get the run going against Nebraska, Kessler's going to destroy you. And who knows how this secondary is going to react. I mean, think about it. To be honest, it's probably just a spring game. Or, you know, and I know the players want to win. Offensively, I don't think anything changes. I think it's Ameer and Tommy throwing quick outs, you know, seeing what Ameer can do against that line. I mean, Ameer's done it before. He had a better year last year with a worse offensive line. So it's not like Ameer's, you know, not used to having to make the yards all by himself. So, am I confident Nebraska will win? Not really right now. I don't see any reason to be confident. I probably got to tear it in a little bit, and just to be honest. But defensively, what that worries me about Nebraska worries me that, you know, no Gregory and, you know, your play caller completely changing with completely different schemes and such, and you're trying to run something for a game against a team that has a clue what they're doing. That worries me a lot. And, yeah, it really worries me that Sarkisian can just go nuts on Nebraska's defense.
I think if you look at the frontline personnel of USC, I think they're an extremely talented team. I think they're a top 10 or 12 team just if you look at the first line of the depth chart. You mentioned Cody Kessler. His numbers are a little deceiving, though, because if you dig just a little bit, he didn't perform that well against the better defenses. He made his hay against Washington State and against some of the lesser teams in the Pac-12. He feasted on Notre Dame in the finale when they put up 49 points. He struggled specifically, and this is where Randy Gregory is going to be missed. He may have had a heyday against that USC offensive line. I think that's the weakest unit for the Trojans, and UCLA tore them to shreds up front, and Kessler didn't have time to throw that entire game, and the Bruins took him to the woodshed. So that's too bad. Nelson Aguilar is a special player at wide receiver. He's not only a freak of an athlete, he's a very polished wide receiver, knows how to run the routes, find the soft spot in the zone, do the right things, doesn't drop passes. He's a great player.
Yeah, I think I know about Aguilar. I think the one thing about you'll see with that, Aguilar will probably get matched with Brierson Cockrell, who has become pretty much the best cover corner for Nebraska. They'll probably cheat. I would say Jerry on there. You know, Nathan Jerry got named co-defensive MVP with Malik Collins this year in the team awards, and Jerry's become pretty good, and he's going to keep his secondary coach through at least next year. So the secondary isn't worrying me, but like it's like I said, it's going to be Malik Collins, and that's it. Vincent Valentine's going to have the game of his year to help out Gangwish on the other side. Marcus Newby's going to have to be a pretty good pass rusher. That hasn't happened all year. Nebraska's really kind of thin at defensive line, if you think about it. Internally not, but on the edges, it's going to be kind of interesting to see. They may throw a linebacker in there, and heck, they can even probably run that little amoeba defense that everybody likes to see, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I kind of want to see that too, but it's going to be definitely interesting to see what happens. That USC offense versus that Nebraska defense.
Yeah. Similarly, on defense, USC's got like 5 or 6 legitimate star players, guys that will play in the league, but they don't have the depth. Of course, we know about the scholarship reductions. They just don't have the depth, and maybe Nebraska hurts them in special teams. Maybe they play better in the trenches. I know Nebraska's had their own issues along the offensive front with injuries. I saw the Iowa game and saw guys get carted off the field. I don't know if they'll be back, but I saw a couple guys get hurt in that Iowa game. But that's where I think Nebraska could possibly take advantage. Better depth, better special teams.
The one thing I would say to that is Paul Thurston's going to be the center. He's a third-string center for Nebraska. Mark Planey's out, and Sterup probably sounds like he's not going to go. Nebraska's probably going to go on their left side of the line. Jake Cotton, senior Alex Lewis Jr., 2 guys that Nebraska we thought was going to and start out the year as the go-to guys on the line. Probably something that's going to happen again for Nebraska on that. Running right, it's going to be kind of a who's who on that, but running left for Nebraska is probably going to be the lunch pail thing that everybody's going to have to worry about. And definitely one thing I want to see is guys like Terrell Newby, Pearsonell, and Ameer. I want to see how their speed matches up with Southern Cal. I have a feeling that Ameer and Sua Cravens, who Nebraska recruited very hard to get and could not, I have a feeling those two are going to meet a lot on that next Saturday. It's going to be interesting to watch that matchup.
So, Brian, the Huskers are 9-3. If they win this game, I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but let's say they beat USC, a very good football team, not a great team, but a top 15 or 20 team. I don't care what the rankings say. They're one of the best 15 or 20 teams in the country. Nebraska pulls off this win. If you look at Nebraska's schedule, and specifically the losses, I would hope that they're going to get their due in the final polls. Based on what the College Football Committee tells us and based on at least one of the 2 polls, they're not in the top 25. There are a bunch of 8-4 teams ahead of them, and if they come through this thing at 10-3, finish off with a win against USC, have a win against a Miami team that I know is 6-6 right now, but should win the bowl game, and they took Florida State to the wire. It's a talented Miami team that's much better now late in the season with Kaya having developed. And then on top of that, the 3 losses are against 3 extremely good teams, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, that could finish very highly ranked, all 3 of them.
Yeah, their best win, if they won next Saturday, their best win would be that USC game, and I can't see why you don't put them in the top 25 in that, yeah, they lose Ameer, On offense, yeah, they lose Kenny Bell. They'll probably lose Randy Gregory. Secondary, they lose a safety, Corey Cooper. But yeah, I think you put them in the top 25, and then I think you put them maybe the top 20 starting next year. And that's just a testament of, hey, they're going to have the ability to start fresh. A lot of these kids are going to want to look for new starts after all the drama that's happened the last 3 weeks or such. And it seems like Mike Riley has really done a good job of being calm, making sure that we're going to play. He's said this to the staff. He said this to players. He said this to everybody. We're going to play to the strengths of the players. Mark Banker, the defensive coordinator at Oregon State, ran a 3-4. That may not work right now in Lincoln. He may run a 4-3. Nebraska was a spread team offense. Riley's got more of a pro style, West Coast I formation and such. He may run a little more spread, and that's more evident that he hasn't named an offensive coordinator yet, which is kind of interesting to me that he just wouldn't throw in a West Coast pro style guy and just call it good. So he's probably open to being a little more spread than everybody thinks. Nebraska's really kind of set up for that. I mean, there's a lot of good offensive linemen coming up in the hinges that have not played or gotten red shirts, but I would definitely say that Nebraska wins this game. You definitely should be ranked across the board, top 20, top 25, maybe even around 20th and such, depending on where the other things. But this would be Nebraska's best win. Basically, in USC's home, it's a home game for USC. I mean, LA and San Diego are an hour apart, whereas Nebraska's, half a continent away. So I would definitely say that the upset would justify a top 25 ranking, even a top 20 ranking for both polls. So,
Brian, I'm guessing that you and the boys at Corn Nation have not made your predictions yet. It's way too early, but at least at this point, can you give us kind of a percentage guess on the chances you give, the probabilities of Nebraska pulling out a win at the Holiday Bowl?
40% at best.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I think that, I keep harping on it, but the defense is going to be the difference. Offense is going to score points. I mean, it's not like that offense has ever been shut out, really, save maybe the Wisconsin game when everything just, got on a big old downfall. But in the whole grand scheme of things, Nebraska can score points. Is what they do against Sarkisian. I don't know if they're going to win the game. Kind of want to see what kind of reaction that the team gives before the game. What kind of practice schedule and such like that, how they're treating some people just treat it as, hey, we're in San Diego. I'm at a snowy Lincoln, Nebraska. I get some cool gifts. I get a gift card to Best Buy. I'm going to get a PlayStation. Call it good. Oh, I got to play football. Let's see what the senior leadership does. I mean, it's pretty tumultuous time for Nebraska right now. It's probably one. We just went through this 7 years ago. Granted, with the dismissal of Bill Callahan, but there was no bowl game involved. Right now, there's a bowl game involved. Nebraska still has something to play for, and it's not like next year you can just start the season and build the momentum there. First game next year against a very talented BYU team, Bronco Mendenhall comes to Lincoln. Okay, you may be a dog in your first game. So this is when you start building momentum towards spring practice because, it's Mike Riley's show now. I mean, Barty Cotton's going to ride in the sunset off the UNLV with John Garrison to go on Tony Sanchez's staff, regardless of whether they win or not. Now, whether they rent a Fiat and drive 45, or they rent the convertible and open it up and drive in the middle of the sun, it's going to depend on whether Nebraska wins. And there's a justifiable reason for Nebraska to try because you know what? Yeah, Bo Pelini's not in Nebraska. Yeah, these are all his players, but guess what? In the end of the day, it's still Nebraska Cornhusker football, and they're gonna play Nebraska whether Bo Pelini's there or not right now for at least one game. So make yourself proud. And again, I don't know if they're gonna. I'm not sure if they're gonna win, but there's reason to play. Definitely, it's not just for the salvage a 10-win season.
Brian Towle of SB Nation's Corn Nation, the Nebraska platform on SB Nation, breaking down the Holiday Bowl. It's a glamour matchup. Again, the two teams aren't great this season. We all know that, but it's USC, it's Nebraska. I'm going to watch it. There's no doubt about that. I've got to see USC and Nebraska play any year. They're going to suit up. So, Brian, Appreciate the time as always.
And no problem. Have a great night, man.